Election Eve. We crisscross the country looking at Catholic issues and where candidates stand ahead of tomorrow's midterms. Message to the world. Pope Francis meets with Jewish leaders and delivers strong words to Christians about anti-Semitism. Anger in Iran. The Trump administration unleashes a new round of sanctions on Tehran, and the country reacts. And the right to vote. My commentary on why Americans should not take for granted the ability to cast a ballot. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 5th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Nothing is certain tonight in an election that is widely being viewed as a referendum on the Trump presidency. While the Democrats are favored to gain control of the House, the latest polling suggests the Republicans could still hang on by winning key races, while the Senate is expected to remain in GOP hands. Several too close to call contests have cast doubt on that outcome as well. And there could be upsets in major governors' races. In a moment, our exclusive poll findings on the issues Catholics really care about in this election. But first, our team has fanned out across the nation tonight, bringing you the last-minute push in races that could decide whether President Trump's party keeps full control of Congress. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee is in Texas. Correspondent Jason Calvi is in Arizona. And correspondent Mark Irons is in Indiana. We begin this evening with Mark Irons, who is live at a Make America Great rally.
Lauren, the president admits these midterms are a referendum on his presidency. Now, we spoke to daily Mass-going Catholics here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, who support the Republican candidate for the Senate, Mike Braun, because he's pro-life. At the same time, incumbent Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly claims to be pro-life, but he doesn't have the record to back that up. President Trump says when voters go to the polls tomorrow, everything's at stake. A frantic final day on the campaign trail beginning in Cleveland.
I did a lot of stops. I saw a lot of people.
The president is capping a 6-day, 11-city tour in support of Republican Senate candidates, touting U.S. low unemployment and job creation.
America now has the best economy in the history of our country.
He's also blaming the other side.
Democrats want to invite caravan after caravan of illegal aliens to pour into our country. I don't think so.
President Trump's diehard supporters waiting for hours to hear him. In Fort Wayne, we meet Mike, the first person in line Sunday night, 20 hours before the president takes the stage.
Going towards a pro-life agenda and a pro-American agenda all around, and I just had to be here to support it.
He's also backing the president's guy, Senate Republican pro-life candidate Mike Braun. Democratic incumbent Joe Donnelly is looking for re-election in a state that helped sweep President Trump into the presidency.
There's only one way we can get on with building a wall or improving health care. Stop demonizing the other side.
At St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church in Fort Wayne, pro-life parishioner Everett Espy isn't buying Democrat Joe Donnelly's conservative-seeming ads.
He's pro-gun, pro-life.
Joe Donnelly says he's pro-life.
I believe he is. But his party isn't.
His vote is going to Mike Braun. President Trump is so focused on this race, he also campaigned for Braun days ago in Indianapolis. A different scene last night in Gary, Indiana.
The main reason I'm here is to make sure that we send Joe Donnelly back to the U.S. Senate.
President Obama says his successor is casting poor migrants journeying to the U.S. as a threat to the country. Retired Army vet and Fort Wayne Catholic Jim Monier is upset with the president for that very reason.
To treat and act like we're being invaded by an army of criminals and rapists and whatever, that's silly.
President Trump speaks to his supporters here in Indiana, then jets off to Missouri for one last rally for Republican candidate for the Senate, Josh Hawley. Lauren.
Mark, just how close is this Senate race in Indiana?
Well, Lauren, two recently released polls from Fox and NBC News show Donnelly with a slim lead, but it's no surprise that at this point, it's just too close to call. Lauren.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot of that. White House correspondent Mark Irons in Fort Wayne tonight. Thank you, Mark. And Arizona voters could decide which party controls the narrowly divided U.S. Senate. Democrat Kyrsten Sinema faces Republican Martha McSally for the seat of retiring Republican Jeff Flake. Tonight, polls show the candidates are in a dead heat. Correspondent Jason Calvi returns to Phoenix, Arizona. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Democrats hope to flip this seat. They haven't held a Senate seat in Arizona since 1995. President Donald Trump won this state by 3.5 points. Tonight, Republican Martha McSally is rallying in the very spot where Senator John McCain and Senator Barry Goldwater wrapped up their presidential campaigns.
All right, so God bless you all. God bless America. God bless Arizona.
Congresswoman Martha McSally was valedictorian of her class at a Catholic school in Rhode Island. Now the former fighter jet pilot hopes to land in the Senate.
On border security, I am working closely with President Trump to secure our border, build a wall, crack down on sanctuary cities, right? Fix our broken immigration system, close these loopholes.
It's almost showtime in a very close race with Democratic Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. Sinema's a former Green Party activist, the first member of Congress to say she has no religious affiliation. And she's making headlines after declaring she's attracted to both men and women. She calls herself a bipartisan moderate and holds one of the most conservative House voting records among Democrats.
I know Arizonans deserve a senator who just solves problems. Not in a Republican way or a Democratic way, but just solves the problems.
Our EWTN poll of Catholic voters finds immigration is a top issue for Catholic voters. Both candidates say they support sending troops to the U.S.-Mexican border. But on abortion, McSally and Sinema diverge.
Important decisions such as that should be made between a woman, her family, and her doctor, free from government interference.
I am pro-life, and I have a very strong pro-life record.
In Arizona, conservative Republican Barry Goldwater held a Senate seat for 5 terms. His son tells me he backs McSally.
She is a conservative, and the great thing about a conservative, we have a foundation that's based on principles of limited government, personal responsibility. We want a government that is not intrusive in our lives, but creates a cradle to help those who are less fortunate. We believe in a strong defense.
Even though she's a Democrat, Sinema wants to be seen as an independent.
I've been ranked the 3rd most independent member of Congress, and it's because I'm willing to stand up against my party to do what's right.
But Republicans really want to grow their 51-seat Senate majority, and pro-life groups across the country are helping them in that work. Right here in Arizona, the Susan B. Anthony list has knocked on 52,000 doors for McSally. Lauren?
We've seen the party heavyweights hitting the stage in other close Senate races. Tell us what's happening there in Arizona.
It's really the tale of 2 campaigns, 2 races. You've got McSally, the Republican. She's been helped by President Donald Trump, Vice President Pence, Donald Trump Jr., all rallying for McSally here in Arizona. Whereas the Democrat, Sinema, hasn't had any of those big names like former President Barack Obama campaigning for her. She's really trying to reach out to moderates, to centrists, as well as Republican women who may be turned off by President Obama.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting in Phoenix. Excellent reporting. Thank you, Jason. Texans are coming out by the millions to determine their next senator. Incumbent Ted Cruz, a Republican, is hoping to win re-election, but he is being challenged by Representative Beto O'Rourke, who has raised record-breaking amounts of money. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has been following the candidates from his home state. He joins us from Pearland, just outside of Houston. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Both candidates are crisscrossing across the state, going to restaurants, community centers, and even churches. Now, Democrat Beto O'Rourke believes the surge in early voting numbers in the state of Texas will favor him, while incumbent Ted Cruz is making his pitch to people of faith.
God bless Texas.
Ted Cruz getting a warm welcome during a rally at the non-denominational First Church of Pearland today. He's playing to his Republican base in Texas, preaching about the Lone Star State's strong economy.
I've been proud to work hand in hand with the President and the administration, repealing job-killing regulations, regulations that were hammering the state of Texas, regulations that were hammering oil and gas and farmers and ranchers and ag.
But can a Republican really be dethroned by a Democrat in a state as red as Texas?
Beto! Beto! Beto!
That's exactly what Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke is hoping to do. O'Rourke is headed to his native El Paso to finish an underdog campaign that's drawn national attention as he's toured through all Texas' 254 counties. As a result, he's made it the most competitive Senate race in a generation out of Texas, where Democrats have been shut out statewide office since the 90s.
We don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. All we care is that you're here and that you can work together, not against anyone, but for a better, stronger future for this country. That could be public education, that could be health care, that could be immigration.
O'Rourke, who identifies as Catholic, is hoping that last issue, immigration, will play in his favor. He's denounced President Trump sending troops to the border as a result of a Central American migrant caravan. Still, it will be an uphill battle for O'Rourke among pro-lifers. Texas Right to Life has denounced his voting record while in Congress, noting that he was against the 20-week abortion ban and didn't vote against federal funding for abortion. Meanwhile, it remains to be seen whether President Trump's strong endorsement of Cruz, a former political rival, will be enough to put Cruz over the top.
And I'll tell you what, nobody has helped me more with your tax cuts, with your regulation, with all of the things that we're doing, including military and our vets, than Senator Ted Cruz. Nobody.
So far, early voting numbers in Texas tally more than 4.8 million, a large jump from the 2016 election. Now, most polls have Ted Cruz in the lead at this point, but it varies as to how narrow or how wide the margin. An average on Real Clear Politics average has Ted Cruz right now in the lead by 6.5 percentage points. Lauren?
Well, you mentioned a rise in early voting. Does that favor one candidate or the other?
Well, certainly both candidates are claiming it's good for their campaign. Beto O'Rourke has been a little bit more vocal about this issue. He said that it really favors him, and he says he feels optimistic about it because he's made it a point in his campaign to get out and talk about early voting. And in addition, though, political analysts do say just because they've gotten out and talked about it doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that the majority of those votes will go to him. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from Texas. Thank you, Wyatt. Stay with our EWTN News Nightly team for comprehensive coverage of the midterm elections. We will have you covered on air and online, and a special Facebook Live will air as polls close on the East Coast tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will also have results for you Wednesday. Hundreds of migrants have arrived in Mexico City. They are part of the caravan of Central American refugees. They began their journey to the United States 3 weeks ago. Officials in Mexico say they are expecting at least 5,000 marchers. Fury in Iran as the Trump administration reimposes sanctions on the Islamic Republic. The decision ends the economic benefits President Obama granted Tehran in 2015. It was part of the country's nuclear deal with world powers. Iran's president warns of a, quote, war situation with the U.S. and accuses the White House of being bullies. The administration has issued waivers to 8 countries, allowing them to continue to receive oil from Iran without penalties. And they include Italy, China, and Japan, among others. The Catholic woman acquitted of blasphemy last week in Pakistan remains in jail. Asia Bibi served 8 years on death row. Her release has been delayed, at least in part following countrywide protests. Her husband appealed yesterday for help from President Trump and British Prime Minister Theresa May. The family is seeking asylum. Ukraine's president meets with the prelate considered first among equals in the Orthodox Church. Petro Poroshenko and Bartholomew I discussed the Ukraine Orthodox Church's plans to break ties with Moscow. Kiev has been under Russian Orthodox jurisdiction since the 1600s. Both the president and Bartholomew say they are in favor of independence. An Australian nun returns to her country after being deported from the Philippines. She's urging church leaders to fight human rights abuses there. Sister Patricia Fox angered President Rodrigo Duterte when she joined anti-government protests. Fox said today that the Philippines is enduring, quote, a reign of terror and tyranny. Pope Francis is encouraging the world to reject anti-Semitism.
Come più volte ho ricordato, un cristiano non può essere antisemita.
He condemned current anti-Semitic attitudes as he greeted a group of rabbis visiting the Vatican from the Caucasus today. Francis has had a long relationship with the Jewish community in his native Argentina. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliette, the Pope's comments come less than 10 days after a massacre here in the United States at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. Did the Holy Father bring up this shooting?
Lauren, Pope Francis did not actually refer specifically to the Pittsburgh massacre, but his message was very clear. The Holy Father says we're all called to make sure that anti-Semitism is, quote, banned from the human community. Francis says we mustn't forget the Holocaust and past errors shouldn't be repeated. So the Holy Father referred to the upcoming 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, when German Nazis attacked Jews and their property. He also mentioned the recent 75th anniversary of the roundup and deportation of Jews in Rome. When the city was under Nazi occupation, they were sent to concentration camps, including Auschwitz. Lauren.
Can you give us a brief snapshot of the group of rabbis who met with the Pope?
Lauren, the group is called the World Congress of Mountain Jews. They come from nations in the Caucasus, so mainly Azerbaijan, Chechnya, Dagestan, and Ingushetia. They are descendants of Persian Jews, and the main Jewish community in the region is in Azerbaijan. There's a town there, Lauren, that is called the Red Village, and it's often referred to as the Jerusalem of the Caucasus. Now, this is the first time that a delegation of mountain Jews met the Pope in the Vatican, but Francis did visit Azerbaijan 2 years ago, and today the Holy Father praised the interreligious harmony that exists in that Muslim-majority country.
Well, he's had a good relationship with the Jewish community. How does the Vatican promote ties between the Church and the Jewish faith?
The Holy Father has made great efforts to reach out to the Jewish community, although in his meeting this morning with the rabbis, he didn't reference the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. He did pray for the deceased and their families in his Angelus last Sunday, the day after the attack. Francis expressed his closeness to Pittsburgh's Jewish community. And Lauren, the Holy Father also called it an inhumane act of violence. In terms of interreligious dialogue, the Vatican's Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity oversees ties between Catholics and Jews. Within the council, there is a body specifically for bringing together the Jewish community and the Catholic Church. Lauren.
Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, what if Democrats take the House? We preview what could happen. We continue with our midterm election coverage in our exclusive EWTN News Nightly poll. Here are the issues that Catholics in America say are the most important to them. 28% say health care, followed by immigration at 18%. Safety and gun violence is third at 17%. And from June to September, here is how media in print, broadcast, and online are treating Catholic-related issues. Nearly a third of stories from June to September focused on abortion. About a quarter highlighted LGBT issues, and more than 1 in 10 reports dealt with the Supreme Court nomination battle for now Justice Brett Kavanaugh. 1 in 10 were involved in immigration, but in October that has undoubtedly changed given the president's focus on the migrant caravan of Central Americans making their way to the U.S. border, possible changes to birthright citizenship, and other immigration issues. Joining me now is Genevieve Wood, Senior Communications Advisor at the Heritage Foundation and Senior Contributor for the Daily Signal. Genevieve, welcome back to the program.
Happy Election Eve.
Yes, I was going to say that. Happy Election Eve to you, too. More than 32 million Americans have voted early or by absentee ballots. Predictions are holding steady that the Democrats are going to take the House, that they will win the 23 seats that are needed to regain the majority. As you just saw, our Catholic in America poll showed that media coverage of Catholic issues on the subject of abortion is important, and LGBT issues. If Democrats win, How will it affect those issues?
Well, I think they would like to take up those issues for sure and take them towards the left. But I think what will depend is, number one, will they actually win? We'll have to see what happens. Polls are one thing on the day before the election. There's something else on the election day itself.
We learned that in the Trump election, didn't we?
Yes, we did. But I think if they do win, it will greatly depend on by how much. So in other words, they need 23 seats to get a majority. If they only pick up 30, that only gives them a 7 or 8 seat majority. I don't think they'll be able to do a lot with that because there will be too many Democrats in the House that are from districts which President Trump won back in 2016, and they, of course, will be up again in 2020. So it's going to be very tough to take all of those folks and get them to go with a really left-leaning agenda. Now, if they pick up 20-plus seats in a majority, that's a whole different ballgame.
And if they do, what would the top priority be for Democrats?
Well, I think number one, I don't think it will be issues. I think it will be things like, let's go impeach the president. Let's try to come up with new investigations. Some of these they'll try to do things, but the Senate, I think Republicans are definitely going to hold. They may pick up 2 or 3 seats, which means some of these things will be dead on arrival.
What about in the Senate? Republicans are poised to maintain control of the Senate. What will their first items of business be?
Well, there's some things the Senate can do by itself, which is like confirm judges, right? So they don't have to have the House pass legislation and send it over. So I think you'll see a lot moving on the judicial side of things. I think what they would like to do is take on things like making tax cuts permanent and so forth, but that they will not be able to do that if the Democrats take over the House.
President Trump has been out on the trail driving home his tough stance on immigration, not touting the booming economy as something that he could. As a longtime political strategist, do you think that runs the risk of turning off some voters, even as it galvanizes others to go vote?
Well, I think what he's doing is what many people know, which is people often tend to be motivated by fear, by anger, by frustration. And I think people are very frustrated with what they see happening on the border, including many people who not only voted for President Trump, but who are even on the independent side and maybe in the middle on a lot of these other issues. They don't like what they're seeing on the border. The economy is going well. It's going great, as a matter of fact. But sometimes that doesn't motivate people. Now, having said that, I think you see individual congressional seats around the country where that is what the candidates in those particular seats are focusing on. Because for them, it's not a national issue, it's their smaller issue in their district.
Genevieve Wood of the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for joining us. Up next, one day before the midterm elections, why Americans should never take voting for granted. A man rushes to the altar during a live mass on EWTN. He yelled, "This is it," and profanities as Father Wade celebrated Mass yesterday morning at our headquarters in Irondale, Alabama. Security removed the man who was detained by police. The network ordered him to stay away from its property. No one was injured, and the Mass continued without further incident. In a statement, our CEO and chairman of the board, Michael Warsaw, writes, "We ask that our EWTN family keep this individual in their prayers." Finally, tonight, my commentary on why it's important to vote. I was dismayed to read over the weekend that 60% of Americans typically don't bother to vote in the midterm elections. They gave reasons like it won't make a difference or the two-party system is crooked. That's abysmal, considering around the world people die for the right to vote. Last month, nearly 170 Afghans were killed or wounded in poll-related violence. In one case, a suicide bomber blew himself up inside a Kabul polling center, killing at least 15 people and wounding 20. Voting is the cornerstone of democracy. And no matter what your political party, it is your voice that can change the direction of a community, a state, and yes, a nation. We are blessed with that right. So go vote. And God bless America. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and at Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.